There are moments when you pray and something feels different. The words come out, the routine is the same, but deep inside something feels distant. Not broken enough to stop, but not alive enough to feel real. You keep going because you believe, but a quiet question starts to grow inside you. Is God really hearing me, or is something getting in the way? You try to push that thought away because it feels wrong to even question it. You remind yourself to have faith, to be strong, to keep trusting. But the silence does not feel peaceful anymore. It feels heavy. It feels like something is not connecting the way it used to. And that is the part no one talks about. What if the problem is not that God stopped listening? What if the problem is not even your faith? What if there are things happening inside you that are quietly interfering with your prayers without you realizing it? Not obvious sins, not dramatic mistakes, just subtle shifts that slowly weaken the connection. Most people never notice this. They keep praying the same way, saying the same words, expecting something to change. But nothing changes because the issue is deeper than the words being spoken. It is something in the heart, something in the posture, something in the way you are showing up before God. And if you are feeling this right now, this is not random. You are not here by accident. There is a reason this message reached you at this exact moment, because sometimes the silence you are experiencing is not rejection. It is an invitation to look deeper and see what has been hidden. Stay with me, because what you are about to see might reveal something you have been missing for a long time, and once you see it, you will not be able to ignore it anymore. You open your mouth to pray, but your heart is somewhere else. The words sound right, familiar, almost automatic, yet something inside you knows you are not fully there. You are speaking, but you are not present. And that quiet distance is where the first barrier begins to form. This does not happen suddenly. It builds slowly, through routine, through repetition, through moments when prayer becomes something you do instead of something you live. You still believe, you still show up, but the connection starts to weaken because your attention is divided. Part of you is praying, and another part is distracted, tired, or emotionally shut down. God does not respond to empty rhythm. He responds to presence. And presence is not about perfect words. It is about being fully there, even in your weakness. But when your heart drifts, even if your mouth keeps speaking, something important is missing. Not from Him, but from you. You may not notice it at first. You may think nothing is wrong because you are still praying every day. But deep down, you can feel it. The weight is different. The peace is not the same. The clarity is gone. And you start to wonder why something that once felt alive now feels distant. This is not about guilt. This is about awareness. Because the moment your prayer becomes routine without presence, it loses the depth that creates connection. And without that connection, it begins to feel like your words are going nowhere. Pay attention to this, because the next sign goes even deeper, and it reveals a pattern that many people live in without ever realizing it. You do not forget to pray, but you only remember when something is wrong. When the pressure builds, when fear shows up, when things begin to fall apart, that is when you turn to God with intensity. In those moments, your prayers feel urgent, real, almost desperate. But when everything is calm, your connection becomes quiet, distant, almost optional. This creates a relationship built on reaction, not on closeness. You are not walking with God, you are running to Him only when something hurts. And without noticing, you begin to associate prayer with problems instead of presence. You train your heart to seek Him only in crisis, not in daily life. God is not a last option. He is not someone you call when everything else fails. But when prayer only happens in difficult moments, something shifts inside you. The relationship loses depth because it is not being built consistently. It becomes seasonal, unstable, dependent on circumstances. And this is where something subtle happens. You start to feel like God is distant, but the truth is, the connection was never being maintained. It was only being activated when you needed something, not because you did not care, but because life slowly pulled your attention away. This is not about judgment. This is about seeing clearly. Because when your prayer life is tied only to problems, your spiritual strength weakens in silence. And when you finally need clarity, peace, or direction, it feels like your voice is not reaching the way it should. Look at your pattern, not to feel guilty, but to understand it. Because what comes next is even more hidden, and it affects your prayers in ways most people never notice. There is a kind of noise that no one else can hear, but it never stops inside you. You try to pray, you try to focus, but your mind keeps pulling you back into the same thoughts, the same worries, the same unresolved weight you have been carrying for too long. And without realizing it, your prayer is competing with everything you have not dealt with. It is not always about obvious sin or visible mistakes. Sometimes it is unprocessed guilt, silent frustration, questions you never allowed yourself to face. These things do not disappear just because you ignore them. They stay and they grow quietly, filling the space where peace should be. You begin to speak to God, but your thoughts interrupt you. You try to listen, but your mind is already answering for Him. You are not just praying, you are battling your own internal noise. And that noise becomes a wall, not because God cannot reach you, but because you cannot hear Him clearly anymore. This is where many people misunderstand what is happening. They think God has become distant, but the truth is, their inner world has become too loud. The clarity they once had is now buried under layers of distraction, stress, and emotional weight that was never released. God does not compete with chaos. He speaks in a way that requires stillness, attention, and openness. But when your mind is constantly full, constantly racing, constantly reacting, there is no room left to recognize His voice, even if He is speaking. You may still feel spiritual, you may still believe, but something feels off. The connection feels weak, not because it is gone, but because it is being drowned out. And the longer this continues, the harder it becomes to separate His voice from your own thoughts. This is not about trying harder. It is about becoming aware of what is inside you. Because if you do not quiet what is within, you will keep mistaking noise for silence and silence for absence. And what comes next is even more revealing, because it shows that sometimes the issue is not that God is not speaking, but that you are not staying long enough to hear Him. You pray, but the moment you finish, you move on. You say what you need to say, you ask what you need to ask, and then you return to your routine as if the conversation is over. There is no pause, no stillness, no space left for a response. And without noticing, your prayer becomes one-sided. It feels productive because you spoke, because you expressed, because you did your part. But connection is not built only through speaking. It is built through listening, through waiting, through being willing to stay in the moment, even when nothing seems to happen right away. Most people are not uncomfortable with talking to God. They are uncomfortable with being still before Him. Silence feels empty, but it is not empty. It is where clarity begins. It is where direction is formed. But if you leave too quickly, you never give yourself the chance to receive anything. You may think God is not answering, but the truth is, you never stayed long enough to hear Him. Not because you do not care, but because your life has trained you to move fast, to expect instant responses, to fill every quiet moment with something else. God does not operate in that rhythm. His voice often comes in moments that require patience, attention, and presence. And when those moments are constantly interrupted, the connection weakens, not because He is absent, but because you are not available. There is a difference between ending a prayer and leaving a conversation too early. And many people never realize they are doing this. They speak, they leave, and then they wonder why nothing changes, why nothing feels different. If you never create space to listen, you will always feel like your prayers are unanswered. Not because they are ignored, but because the response never had a place to land. And what comes next goes even deeper, because it reveals something many people hold on to without realizing it is the very thing standing in the way. There are things you keep holding on to, even while asking God to change your life. You pray for direction, for peace, for something new to begin, but at the same time, there are parts of your life you are not willing to release. Not because you are stubborn, but because they feel familiar, safe, or emotionally attached to who you have been. You ask God to open new doors, but you keep standing in front of the old ones. You ask Him to remove what is hurting you, but when the moment comes to let go, something inside you resists. and that resistance becomes invisible but powerful enough to slow everything down. God does not force transformation. He invites it. And sometimes the answer to your prayer requires a step you have been avoiding, a decision you keep postponing, a release you are not ready to make. Not because you do not trust Him, but because letting go feels like losing something important. What you do not see is that some of your prayers are connected to what you are holding on to. And as long as you keep it, the answer cannot fully unfold. Not because God is withholding it, but because the space for it does not exist yet. This is where many people feel stuck. They keep praying for change, but nothing shifts. They assume something is blocking their prayers. But the truth is, something inside them is not moving. The prayer is real, the desire is real, but the action is missing. Letting go is not easy. It challenges your identity, your habits, your sense of control. But sometimes the breakthrough you are asking for is on the other side of what you refuse to release. And until that moment happens, everything feels delayed. You are not being ignored. You are being prepared. And preparation often feels like silence when you do not understand what is being asked of you. What comes next reveals something even more subtle, because it is not about what you are holding, but about what you are expecting. You pray with expectation, but the expectation is already defined. You have an image in your mind of how the answer should look, when it should happen, and what it should feel like. And without realizing it, you are not just asking God to move, you are asking Him to follow your version of the outcome. At first, this feels like faith. It feels strong, confident, certain. But over time, that expectation becomes rigid. And when things do not unfold the way you imagined, something inside you begins to shift. Not loudly, not all at once, but quietly. You start questioning, you start doubting, you start losing the sense of trust you once had. The problem is not that you expect something good. The problem is that your expectation leaves no room for anything different. And when God moves in a way you did not predict, you miss it. Not because it is not there, but because it does not match what you were looking for. This creates frustration that you may not even recognize at first. You continue praying, but there is tension now. A subtle disappointment that builds each time things do not happen the way you hoped. And that tension begins to affect how you approach God, how you listen, how you trust. God is not limited by your timeline or your imagination. He sees what you cannot see. He understands what you are not aware of. And sometimes His answer does not align with your expectation because it is leading you somewhere deeper, somewhere better, something you would not have chosen on your own. But when your expectation becomes control, your faith begins to weaken. Not because God changed, but because your trust became conditional, and conditional trust cannot sustain a real connection. You are not losing faith. You are struggling to release control. And that struggle can quietly block what God is trying to do, not by stopping Him, but by closing you off to the way He is working. What comes next is the most dangerous shift of all, because it happens silently, and many people never realize it is happening until it is too late. You are still praying, but something inside you has changed. The words are there, the habit is still alive, but the expectation is gone. You no longer wait with the same anticipation. You no longer believe with the same intensity. And that shift is quiet, almost invisible. But it changes everything. At first, you do not notice it. You tell yourself you are just being realistic, just protecting yourself from disappointment. You continue praying because it is what you have always done, but deep down, you are no longer expecting anything to happen. You are going through the motion, not through the connection. This is where faith begins to fade, not in a dramatic way, but in a silent one. You did not walk away from God. You did not stop believing completely, but something weakened. Hope became uncertain, trust became cautious, and your prayers lost the fire they once carried. And when expectation disappears, your heart closes in ways you do not realize. You stop looking for answers. You stop recognizing small changes. You stop seeing movement. Not because nothing is happening, but because you are no longer expecting to see it. This is one of the most dangerous places to be. Not when you stop praying, but when you keep praying without believing. Because now the connection is not just weakened, it is disconnected emotionally. The words are reaching, but your heart is no longer fully present in them. God has not stopped listening. He has not turned away. But your ability to receive, to recognize, to respond has been affected by something deeper than doubt. It is a quiet loss of expectation that slowly builds over time. You are not alone in this. Many people reach this point without ever admitting it, even to themselves. But recognizing it is the first step to restoring what was lost, because what feels distant can be rebuilt when you see it clearly. And now everything comes together, because what you thought was a blockage may not be what you believed it was. You thought your prayers were being blocked, but now you can see something deeper. It was never about God turning away. It was never about Him ignoring you or refusing to respond. What felt like silence was not rejection. It was a reflection of what was happening inside you. Every sign you just saw is not meant to condemn you. It is meant to reveal something. Not to push you away, but to bring you back with clarity. Because when the connection feels weak, the answer is not to stop praying. The answer is to return differently, with awareness, with presence, with honesty. God has been there the entire time, listening, watching, waiting. Not for perfection, not for flawless words, but for a heart that is fully there. A heart that is willing to be still, willing to let go, willing to trust without controlling every outcome. The distance you felt was not created by Him. It was formed quietly through patterns, through habits, through things that slowly took space inside you. And now that you see it, you have the power to change it, not by forcing something new, but by removing what has been in the way. You do not need a perfect prayer to reconnect. You need a real one that comes from where you truly are, not where you think you should be. One that is honest, even if it feels uncomfortable. Because that is where connection begins again. This is your moment to reset. Not tomorrow, not later, but now. To slow down, to be present, to speak, and stay long enough to listen. To release what you have been holding, and trust what you cannot control. God is not distant. He is near. Closer than you think, closer than you feel. And the moment you return with a sincere heart, the connection you thought was lost begins to come back to life. If this spoke to you, do not ignore it. There is a reason you heard this today. Stay here for a moment and do not rush past this. Let everything you just heard settle inside you, not as information, but as something personal. Because this is not just about understanding why your prayers felt blocked. This is about what you choose to do now that you see it clearly. You do not need to fix everything at once. You do not need perfect words or a perfect mindset. Just come as you are, but come present. Speak honestly, even if your voice feels weak. Stay a little longer than you usually do. Let the silence feel uncomfortable, because that is where something new begins. You have been trying to reach God, but the truth is, He has already been reaching you. In the quiet moments you ignored, in the discomfort you tried to avoid, in the thoughts you pushed away. None of that was random. It was all part of something trying to draw you closer. Do not go back to routine. Do not return to automatic prayers that carry no presence. This time, slow down. This time, be aware. This time, allow yourself to feel the connection instead of just completing the habit. What you are looking for is not far from you. It is not hidden behind some complicated process. It begins the moment you become real again, the moment you stop performing and start connecting. And if something inside you is responding to this right now, do not ignore it. That is not just emotion, that is awareness waking up. That is the moment where change becomes possible. Carry this with you after this ends. Not as something you watched, but as something you lived. Because from this point forward, your prayers do not have to feel the same anymore. Do not let this moment pass like everything else. You have heard things that most people ignore, things that expose what is happening beneath the surface. And now you stand in a place where you can either return to the same pattern or choose something different. This is not about trying harder. It is about being real. When you pray again, do not rush. Do not repeat empty words. Stop for a moment and recognize that you are not speaking into silence. You are speaking to someone who has been waiting for you to come back with honesty. Say what is truly inside you, not what sounds right, but what is real. If you feel distant, say it. If you feel tired, say it. If you feel confused, do not hide it. Because the connection you are looking for does not begin with perfection. It begins with truth. And then stay. Do not leave immediately like before. Let the quiet exist without trying to escape it. Let your mind slow down. Let your heart settle. Because in that space, something begins to shift. Not always in a way you can explain, but in a way you can feel. You are not alone in this. You were never alone. Even in the moments when it felt like nothing was happening, something was being formed inside you. Something was being prepared, even if you could not see it yet. From this point on, your prayers can be different. Not louder, not longer, but deeper, more present, more real. And when that changes, everything else begins to follow. So do not go back to the way it was. Take this with you, live it. And when you pray again, remember this moment, because this could be the moment everything starts to change.